All right, I'll call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. If we could have a roll call, please.
Ms. Bindum? Mr. Fell?
Here.
Mr. Fitch?
Here.
Mr. Hopkins?
Here.
Mr. Otto? Ms. Stake?
Here.
Mr. Trail?
We do have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda?
No.
Minutes. Move. Do we have anybody cares to move the minutes?
I will move to approve the minutes of September 4th.
Can I get a second? Moved by Mr. Fell, seconded by Mr. Hopkins. Are there any changes or corrections? All right, well, all in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The minutes are approved. Do we have any communications?
There is a new recommendation for the special use permit plan cases that's been handed out. And Kevin is actually making copies for the audience as well.
Great.
There.
Thank you, Mr. Ingram, Mr. Garcia. Okay. With that, I will resume continued public hearings. Plan case 2240 SU14, a request by Henson Disposal for a special use permit to establish a construction and demolition debris recycling center at 910 West Saline Court in the IN2 Heavy Industrial District. Also, plan case 2241 SU14, a request by Southwind RAS LLC for modification of a special use permit for a recycling center at 910 and 1000 West Saline Court in the IN2 Heavy Industrial Zoning District. So the hearing being open, the staff will now present a summary of the case. Petitioner will outline their request and present evidence. Other proponents may present evidence. Opponents with a material interest in the case may ask questions of the petitioner through me. Others may be heard. Staff may make additional comments or clarification. Petitioner may rebut and summarize their case. Then we will conclude the public hearing, and the Plan Commission will discuss the case and may vote on the case. So, Mr. Garcia.
Good evening.
Is that going
Yeah,
through?
you're good.
There we go. Okay. Pardon me. So, just as a brief introduction, in December 2013, some of you may recall that Southwind RAS LLC was issued a special use permit to establish an asphalt roof recycling facility at 1000 West Saline Court and on the northern 400 feet of 910 West Saline Court. And that was Plan Case 2216-SU-13. Now, a special use permit was required in that case, and it was approved. That was in order to establish the recycling center in the IN2 Heavy Industrial District. That special use permit included a conditional use permit to allow for two principal uses on 910 West Saline Court, which was in accordance with our zoning ordinance in that area. And this was done to ensure that Southwind could continue to operate on the northern portion of the site at such time that the southern portion was developed by Henson Disposal. And they were going to construct a construction waste recycling facility. Now in the current plan case, 2241-SU-14, Southwind RAS is applying for a modification to their approved special use permit from that previous case to allow site plan changes to their site plan. Now in a related case, plan case 2240-SU-14, Henson Disposal is now applying to establish a construction and demolition debris recycling facility at 910 West Saline Court. And as I mentioned before, a special use permit is required to establish recycling centers in the IN2 Heavy Industrial District, and that is what this application is for. And I will point out that the use for Henson on that southern part was, as I mentioned, granted as a conditional use permit in that previous Southwind special use permit case. Just a little more background about the site and the area. So the property in question, it consists of 2 lots that were platted back in 2013. They're currently vacant, and they're at the northwestern edge of the city on Salient Court, so that's right up off of North Lincoln, north of I-74. So let's see. So Southwind, as I mentioned, they would establish a recycling center on the site at 1000 West Salient Court and 910 West Salient Court, and then Henson would establish that construction waste recycling center on the southern part. And now Southwind RAS currently has all of its required EPA permits for their site and their operations. Henson will need to apply for Illinois EPA approval for permits, including beneficial use permits and a 2238 permit, which is the permit required for a recycling facility that does sorting of materials on site. I'll get to the EPA permits again in a little bit because it's a little confusing, but hopefully we can explain it in an understandable way. Now the site in question, 1000 West Salient Court is about 2.3 acres, 910 West Salient Court is 6 acres, and the surrounding areas are all industrial or agricultural in nature. To the west, you've got the Emulsicoat asphalt facility and a Republic Services waste transfer station. To the north, there's some agricultural uses going on. East of the site is where, as I mentioned, this is up North Lincoln Avenue. That's where the future Lincoln Avenue realignment will go. And then to the south, there's some vacant land and a detention basin. Further south, there's a concrete recycling facility. So the surrounding uses are compatible with the proposed uses and pretty similar as well. Now, as I stated before, in Plan Case 2216-SU-13, that was Southwind was granted a special use permit to establish their recycled asphalt shingle operation. And then currently what you all are reviewing today are just for the modifications to the site plan. And that's all you're considering in this case. Now, the Henson disposal facility would be a facility that would recycle general construction and demolition debris. So this would include things like wood, metal, plastic, glass, cardboard, etc. And initially, the sorting of materials would take place at Henson's other existing facility over in Bloomington until such time that the market was established enough that they could take over local sorting operations at the Urbana facility. The Bloomington facility has been in operation for about 3 years, and it's, according to the applicant, it's just now gotten to the level that's required to maintain operations. So they believe that it would be a similar time frame to get up to speed in Urbana. Just as a note, the U.S. EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, estimated in a study back in 2003 that over 50% of construction and demolition materials wound up in landfills. And that's a pretty staggering number. And the EPA has since targeted those materials for reduction, reuse, and recovery as part of its resource conservation challenge. And the Henson facility would help to meet that challenge. Now, the site itself and the facility and operations would take place. There would be a 40,000 square foot building, which would be open. It would be enclosed on 3 sides. It would be open on the north side, which is where the trucks would come in and then dump their materials for sorting and processing. There would also be a storage yard, which could be used to store excess construction and demolition materials until they were sorted. So if you look at your exhibits for the site plan, which are, let's see, at the back of your packet, Exhibit G shows the proposed site plan for both sites. Actually, pardon me. Wait, is that correct? No, sorry. Exhibit G is the
That's the old one, isn't it?
is the old site plan. Sorry, that's the approved site plan from the previous special use case. So pages C3A and C3B are the proposed site plan, and it's kind of hard to see since it's on 2 pages. But trucks would enter the site right under on C3A, where it says where you see Saline Court right there in the middle. There's an existing construction entrance, and that's where they are proposing to have the entrance. Pardon me, let me pull that up so the audience can see this as well.
Oh, well, here it is.
Yeah, and this will probably be easier to point out to you all also. Okay. There we go. Okay, so here we are. So trucks would enter the facility from where it says Saline Court. They would head north. They would go over the scales that are up here. The scales are right next to that square that says that's a 30 by 30 scale house. That's where they would do the operations for the scales. Then they would swing around to the north, turn back south, head into the building, they would turn around by the entrance back into the building, dump their materials, and then the processing would take place. Okay, now on to a little bit more about the EPA permit process and the current House bill that is going through the Illinois legislature. So Henson Disposal had planned on pursuing a local siting permit from the EPA to allow construction and to allow their recycling facility on that southern portion of the site. However, the Illinois legislature passed a bill, House Bill 4606, that would exempt construction and demolition recycling centers from the local siting permit process. On August 18th, though, the governor vetoed the bill with an amendatory veto, so now the bill is sort of waiting for action from the state legislature. Henson Disposal has proposed this special use permit because they want to get the ball rolling in case that bill ends up passing. Then they wouldn't need the local siting permit. Then they could be pursuing the other EPA permits that they would need for the site in the meantime. If they wait to see what happens with that bill, their operations would be pushed back, so they wouldn't be able to get the other permits that are required in time to start in the summer, which is what they're going for. So really they're pursuing the special use permit here such that if that bill does get passed, then they'll be able to start operations in May or June of this coming year. If the bill doesn't become law, then they're going to have to go through the local siting permit process, which could take a longer time. And one of the applicants, Rich Gerard, is here, and he can answer all your questions, I think, on the EPA permits and such, because he is much more of an expert than I. Okay, now the requirements for a special use permit, according to Section 7-4A of the Urbana zoning ordinance, state that the special use permit needs to demonstrate the following. Number one, needs to demonstrate that the proposed use is conducive to the public convenience at that location. And just as a discussion, so the properties that are located in the North Avenue North Lincoln Avenue Industrial Park subdivision are all, as I mentioned, they're heavy industrial uses. There's an asphalt plant, concrete recycling facilities, and a waste transfer station. The nearest residences are at least 1,200 feet to the east of the property. The site is good for industrial uses. It's really close to I-74, to the future Lincoln Avenue and Olympian Drive extension to the north. And our comp plan also designates the area as or for heavy industrial uses. So we think that the proposed, both the Southwind Recycling and the Henson Construction Recycling facilities would be highly compatible with the uses in the area. Number 2, the second requirement. The proposed use is designed, located, and proposed to be operated so that it will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it shall be located or otherwise injurious to the public welfare. So the proposed facilities will not be injurious to the public at this location, we feel. The applicant states there are no known ground or water contaminants from the recycling processes. They will control dust on site and during processing. And the proposed special uses will allow for facilities that benefit the public, and that, as I mentioned, it will divert at least some of those construction and demolition materials from local landfills and put them back into good productive use. Also, as I mentioned, the site is located at least 1,200 feet from the nearest residence. Condition 3 for the special use permit is that the proposed use conforms to the applicable regulations and standards of and preserves the essential character of the district in which it is located, except where such regulations and standards are modified by section 7-7. So again, the character, it's a heavy industrial district. Setback and drainage requirements have been met in the site plans. And the uses would conform to the regulations of the IN2 heavy industrial district. Also, I'll just point out that the applicant has agreed to install the required screening and landscaping for industrial uses that will screen their outdoor storage areas per our ordinance. So the Plan Commission needs to determine whether the reasons set forth in the applications justify the granting of the special use permit, and whether the proposed uses will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, and will not be unreasonably injurious or detrimental to the district in which it's located. Let's see. In addition, you can also add conditions to this, including the location, extent and intensity of uses, adherence to the site plan, etc. Yeah, the list is in your memo if you'd like to read them all. So the summary of our findings, also, I think you've read those in your memo. So the options that you have in this case, we split up these two cases. You know what? I left my other sheet. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Okay, so you have updated recommendations, which we felt our original recommendations were a little less clear. So we updated the recommendations, and you have those in front of you. So for the Henson disposal case, case 2240 SU 14, we would recommend that the Plan Commission forward this to the Urbana City Council with a recommendation for approval with the following conditions: that the development be constructed in general conformance with the attached site plan, that a landscape plan be submitted reflecting conformance with the zoning ordinance standards for screening of industrial storage and also required landscape buffers, that Henson Disposal obtains a local siting permit from the Illinois EPA if required by state law prior to development of the site, that Henson Disposal also obtains all other required Illinois EPA permits prior to development of the site. And with respect to Plan Case 2241 SU14, the Southwind RAS case, the conditions are that the development be constructed in general conformance with the attached site plan, and that an updated landscape plan be submitted that reflects the changes in the site plan. I can answer any questions if you have them now, or the applicants, as I mentioned, are on hand to answer questions as well.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia.
Yes.
Any questions for city staff? I just want to clarify, so the Henson Disposal Special Use Permit is simply because of the use of the construction waste recycling facility. And the Southwind RAS is because they moved the scale and the access way from
Yeah.
the original use permit?
Yeah, I think I failed to mention that. So, yeah, the Southwind, the approved site plan had the entrance and the scales further
Right.
south, and now they're just moving them north.
Right. But
Yeah.
that's the only difference really in that.
Correct.
In that. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Anything else for Mr. Garcia? Mr. Fell?
Question. I actually asked this before, but I want to ask again. The city staff and city engineers are okay with whatever runoff comes off of this that runs into our city storm sewer?
We don't have engineers on hand, but yes, they approved, or we had them review the site plans, and they do. I'm no expert on runoff or anything like that, but I do on the site plan they do have fences to control erosion, and also there's some. I think there's some intake controls in there.
Well,
so.
my question really has more to do with, and forgive me for not being expert on exactly what they're storing here, but if we have piles of ground-up shingles that we have runoff that is basically a petroleum product and sand and grit, that, I mean, it's going to, it will have some impact on our storm sewer. And I just want to make sure city engineers and staff are okay with that.
I think Scott Tess might want to weigh in.
This whole industrial development has a regional retention pond that was developed along with the road to handle the stormwater for all the properties.
Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Anything else? Mr. Terrell?
So the retention pond is designed to capture sediment, in other words. So anything that may run off would eventually just settle into the pond and not travel further.
That's correct.
Okay.
Great. Are we through for now? Mr. Garcia, you're excused.
All right, thank you.
And if the petitioner would like to address the Plan Commission, please do so. And if you would state your name so we can get it in the minutes, that would be great.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rich Gerard, G-U-E-R-A-R-D, and I'm here representing actually both petitioners, Southwind RAS and Henson Disposal. Also present to answer any questions, Tom Kirk, who's the principal of Henson Disposal, is right here. He'll be able to answer. And also our engineer that prepared the site plan, Pat Moon, is right in the back here with Farnsworth, and he'd be happy to answer any questions too. I think Mr. Garcia in the staff report just did a very, very complete report of the site and the area and the operation and what's being done. We don't want to waste your time just repeating things again. We might just state a couple overall comments. Maybe I can address the commissioner's comment on the drainage issue. But the one thing that we are doing, we're complying with all of the ordinances. There's no variances. It's in the heavy industrial plan where it's supposed to be with this type of use, and surrounded by compatible uses with the recycled asphalt shingles to the north, the concrete and asphalt recycling, the transfer station across the street. So it's really a place where it was designed to be. And also, I think it's important, again, maybe to stress that this is a green technology for both of these uses. The recycled asphalt shingles has now been approved for use. It's an additive that's used in IDOT and the Tollway Authority, the City of Chicago, most of the counties. It's a green technology that recycles 99% of the asphalt shingles, and they go into a product, asphalt, as actually a positive mix that improves the mix, as opposed to going into the landfills. And so it's a very positive thing. And it's a similar operation with the construction and demolition debris. Instead of going into the landfills and filling up the landfills, the materials are sorted and they're recycled to the extent they can be. So it's a green technology. It's important for a lot of reasons. For companies that are trying to qualify for LEED buildings or green buildings, they have to have a place to go and to have these materials recycled as opposed to go to landfills. And these are needed facilities. They aren't otherwise available in this area. And as I said, we are going to be complying. We're accepting all the conditions and complying with all the ordinances. One, maybe to address your question with the detention or possible runoff, there's a few things. One thing is neither site accepts any type of hazardous material. On top of that, like Southwind RAS, the north facility, has already applied and gotten its NPDES permit. So it has submitted a plan of BMPs, or best management practices, for drainage and so forth, and that's been approved. They have the state permit, and it's also gone through the city engineering for that, in addition to the fact that there is a detention that has sediment and so forth. And then finally, to mention the recycling materials, the asphalt shingles, it's literally the shingles on your house. It's the same shingles that run off your house and run off your driveway and run off. It doesn't have any type of petroleum that comes out of it and leaks onto something else. So that there is no known water quality issue with those materials. So I think all that's been addressed and reviewed by various staff, and both these operations are run in accordance with an IEPA permit that has reporting and they're inspected and the whole process. So it is something that is very regulated and reviewed, and specifically issues that you're addressing. And as I said, I don't want to take any more of your time. This is very similar to what you've already heard just a few months ago. And I think maybe the best, we'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any. And other than that, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the petitioners? Mr. Trail.
Just real quick, you're going to use water for dust control. How much water does you envision that the process would, require?
For the asphalt shingles portion of it, the equipment because what it does, it grinds the shingle into a more of a granular nature that is what is mixed. Inside the grinding equipment are spray bars and spray equipment. So the type of water you were talking about, it's not extensive. It literally sprays inside the equipment just enough to keep the dust down. And then it's a similar situation that would be used with the construction and demolition debris. And I'd let Tom explain, as far as the amount of water use that's used in it?
We have spray bars and dust control inside of our building, so when we're loading it, it kind of controls the dust a little bit better. We actually in Bloomington have the same grinder that Southwind RAS uses for processing their shingles, and we run about a third of a gallon a minute through there while we're running, and then when you're not running, it'll kick itself out. So we don't really have any runoff water at all. It's really actually just to lubricate the cutting heads on it to keep it from getting hot, and it does help kind of keep the dust down a little bit, but the material doesn't come out saturated. It actually still comes out dry, so it's minimal.
Okay.
So really the only runoff we have would be rainwater going down in the ditch. And for our operation, the size of our building is 200 by 200. Everything will be put in the building. I mean, we don't store anything outside at all, other than, just like in Bloomington, we keep our shingles outside. We don't really have any blowing debris or what I would call contaminants that come in the shingle loads, because they really come in almost clean anyways, because they're coming in from roofers and haulers that just really pursue the shingle job. So there is water that's used, but the material really soaks most of it up. Our goal is to use as little water as possible, because anything that we don't recycle, we have to dispose of, and we're charged by weight, and water's heavy. So our goal is actually to use, as little as possible.
All right, great, thank you.
Great, Ms. Stake.
Well, I'm pleased that you're doing all of this. I'm just wondering, what do you do with the glass that we put in? You know, they tell us to put in glass and everything else in the recycle.
Well, your glass actually goes into your commingle recycle, and commingle recycle and C&D materials are actually a different recycle stream. So the glass that you're putting in there really doesn't come to us. And the glass that does come in C&D is not really recycled. We get a lot of it, and it goes out, really the only use that it goes out to is called ADC. It's an alternate daily cover at the landfill. So it'll go to the landfill as a use, because at the end of the day, you have to cover your garbage with the dirt so you don't have odor. And the next day, the trucks can't drive over that dirt, so they put the ADC, which is a lot of glass, rock, and very small waste that comes out of our recycle process. But as far as that glass going out into the market from what we touch, it can't. But in your commingle recycle, that is recycled as a glass product. They can turn that back into a colored glass.
Is that right?
Yep.
Because I know we used to have places where we'd put in glasses in a separate place and other things where we didn't mix it all up, but now we're just mixing everything up.
Yeah, this is
technology
construction waste. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
our home.
Your home waste is now, it's automated. Technology is pretty impressive. They have equipment now that separates the glass. It can remove it from that waste stream even if it's broken.
Okay.
It's
Thank
come a long
you.
way, though. You're right.
Thank you, yeah.
So, any other questions? I think we're good. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Does anybody else care to address the Plan Commission on this case? Hearing no one, I'll close the public hearing and we'll go into discussion. Oh, are you? I didn't see you start to get up there, Ms. Bukusic. So the public hearing's still open?
I was listening for others.
Oh,
I
I'm
guess
sorry.
I guess it wasn't audited.
If you could just introduce yourself and then,
Carol McCusick, 14, oh no, let's try this. 1907 North Cunningham Avenue.
I've been told by city staff that we're no longer supposed to ask for your address due to a court case, and I presume to preserve your privacy, so.
The location of the entrance is, I guess, within the 400 feet from the top of the 910 property? That's a question?
I assume that's true, and that's kind of why I asked about that, if someone on the staff can verify that.
I'm not quite sure if it is, but since both uses are basically using one site, yeah, there's only one entrance for the two uses, so it has to be on one or the other. So it really doesn't matter.
Well, I guess, okay, well, then why it seemed like it might matter is it's, the Henson is completely dependent on, some Illinois EPA things. It sounds like regardless of what happens in the state legislature. So I think people would want to know, I think we'd like to know what you can, what you're allowed to see, going into the entrance. Will there be a certain amount of mixture to the loads going into for the recycled asphalt shingle? And that would be going ahead because Mr. Gerard just said that they already have all their permitting. And by the way, what was an MBBS or an MPPS, or what was that? But if they're going ahead, are they then, even if they're not taking something hazardous, are they strictly taking shingles, is it possible to get that come?
I can ask for clarification on that.
So-
Um,
Because the wider engineering that's being reviewed by the Illinois EPA for Henson might not be in place yet.
Yeah, it's a good, Mr. Engstrom, are you going to?
Just to clarify, yes, the Southwind RAS site, they do have their EPA permits, and it is based on the site plan. I don't think any of the changes to the site plan actually are of importance to those permits, because their drainage, all their drainage and such, is all on the north side anyway. So as far as we're aware, the permits for Southwind RAS, they're still valid. And then the permits for the Henson site, they will be applying for those after they have zoning approval.
Anything further, Ms. McCusick?
So how will the public know when they should be seeing construction loads going there? The more mixed up construction loads.
Let's see, I think the memo talks about if everything goes well, let's see, what is that date?
I think it would be May or June 2015.
May to
so,
June 2015. So next summer.
Okay. Is there somewhere should they know to call the Illinois EPA field office? It would be good to have that phone number. If people were unsure when everything was okay.
I'm sure you can get that off of the internet or any public source.
Okay, so that's all I have to say.
All right. Anyone else care to address us on this? Okay, in that case, now I will close the public hearing. And we will proceed with discussion and or motions. Does anybody have any thoughts or care to go ahead and make a motion, or what are you of a mind to do?
I'll make a short comment. That we are more and more have clients that try to get LEED certification for their buildings, and it's easy to get the lowest level of LEED certification on a building because you can do a lot of that with transportation corridors and things like that. But to get the highest level of LEED certification is really difficult, and this is one of the reasons is there's no place to put your waste. I mean, they have to haul it a long way, so it gets very cost prohibitive to get that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good thing for us to have, I think. So.
Good comment. Anything else? Mr. Hopkins, you're moving around as if you're going to make a motion.
Okay, I move we send plan cases 2240 SU14 and 2241 SU14 to the City Council with a recommendation of approval, subject to the conditions listed in the revised memo.
Moved by Mr. Hopkins. Can I get a second?
I will second that.
Seconded by Mr. Fell. If we could have a roll call when you're ready.
Mr. Fell?
Yes.
Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Ms. Stake?
Yes.
Mr. Trail?
Yeah.
And Ms. Bindem?
Yes.
That motion passes. And so the City Council will hear it in a couple weeks?
Yeah, on October 6th.
October 6th.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, we have no old business, no new public hearings, no new business. So now, audience participation. Does anyone?
Mike, you have another?
We have, the study session is actually after this on the agenda.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was kind of confused by that also, actually. Anyone care to address this, or audience participation? I hope not. I know.
No.
All right, Ms. Bukusic, you've introduced yourself once, so we'll spare you that, and you can have 5 minutes to address us on a topic of your choosing.
Okay, this is from the public hearing, but it didn't have the petitioners who spoke.
Oh, okay, thank you. I got their names.
So Carol McCusick, I promote Board of Government information, like this board, something that would meet in the chambers and be on television, that would try to figure out how to make the city government particularly access to the boards and commissions efficient and very accessible. If I said so, one of the things that they might kind of plumb, I thought, or it would be helpful to have the commissions together with the experts. The board would be stocked with experts. That would be to kind of figure out some a range where which comes on top of the Illinois state laws, like the Illinois Open Meetings Act and the Freedom of Information Act, and before each commission makes its bylaws. I think there's stuff that they would like to have in common. It would be easier for the public understanding the boards. So that might, since a lot of the boards were formed by ordinances of city council, and there is a lot of intricacy to the ordinances, and it's variable, but so maybe actually might be involved is kind of, I'm calling it rolling back those ordinances to like kind of leveling them off, so that then there could be citywide stuff that's in the municipal code under administration, under I guess it's administration and boards and commissions, which would go between the Illinois Open Meetings Act and the bylaws that each board, or special rules of order that each board had for itself. So far, this would be that's why the Board of Government Information, to plumb this, like what would belong in that common stuff, or would that be a solution? Is it the thing I'm talking about a good conclusion? They would look at that.
I'm not sure.
Why I come to Plan Commission is because you're going to be working on bylaws. Actually, you have an annual bylaw review period, and what happened, as far as I can tell, was in March of 2013. It started, but it's still not completed, and we're halfway through another year. That's what I'm...
Yeah, you're correct about that. We're overdue.
So, but it's hard to do that without, like this plumbing process I'm trying to describe. So, I think. One in the advocacy for Board of Government Information, I have a draft motion that has a lot of these reasons that I was hoping all of the various boards would use it as kind of boilerplate to like pass it. That they would see it as proper in their advisory role to the city council to pass it and ask for this additional board, other than you, this Board of Government Information for.
Well, we don't have any purview over Board of Government Information, as we've discussed before. That would, I don't know if any of the commissions would really be able to weigh in on that. I think that probably has to go straight to the city council. So if you could talk to your alderperson and perhaps to get them to introduce the concept.
Well, I'll try to figure out some further argument.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to address the Plan Commission? In that case, audience participation is concluded. And do we have a staff report?
No, we don't.
Okay, then we're going to go into a study session of a presentation of the Climate Action Plan Phase 2.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Scott Tess.
Yeah,
I'm
I
the
think I'll
Environmental
go.
Sustainability Manager
okay?
for the city. And I want to share with you tonight a brief presentation, and perhaps we'll have some discussion about the second phase of Urbana's Climate Action Plan. The main features tonight are going to be reviewing the first phase of our Climate Action Plan, looking at our new 2013 greenhouse gas inventory, and then looking at the second phase of the Climate Action Plan, which is now in draft form and open for public comment. Encourage everyone to make a public comment through our website. A little background to begin with. In 2012, Council approved the first phase of our Climate Action Plan. That was envisaged as a 2-year plan where we do a number of things. First, establish our baseline 2007 greenhouse gas inventory. Second, establish greenhouse gas reduction targets. Third, address some low-hanging fruit actions that we can take for greenhouse gas mitigation. Fourth, doing some surveying and focus groups. And finally, what we're doing right now, which is planning the second longer phase of our Climate Action Plan. In this Phase 2 document, we, first of all, we're addressing a 2015 to 2020 time frame. We stop at 2020 for this plan because that is the first milestone for our two main goals, our greenhouse gas reduction goals in the plan. The document includes a listing of our Phase 1 accomplishments, a review of renewable energy credits. We have two parts to that. There were several discussions at City Council, so we wanted to make sure we addressed it thoroughly in this document. We have an excerpt that describes renewable energy credits in the Phase 2 document. And then in the appendix, we have an annotated bibliography for some different articles and research that have been done regarding renewable energy credits. We also have a review of the 2007 and the 2013 greenhouse gas inventories in this Phase 2 document. And then we show two different types of strategies, bigger impact and or near-term strategies, and also smaller impacts and or longer-term strategies. The latter mostly takes the form of policies that put us on a different trajectory in terms of greenhouse gases, but don't have a huge immediate impact. A few acronyms that you may see in this presentation in the document: greenhouse gases, GHG, and MT or MTCO2E is metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Equivalent means all the different types of gases that contribute to global warming. We're sort of creating an equivalency between them so that we can lump them into one number. I've got a 2-slide listing. This is a copy and paste from the Phase 2 document. I'm not going to read it all. I did bold a couple of items that might be of particular interest to this commission. We were able to incorporate energy efficiency projects into the city's tax increment financing redevelopment program. So you get some extra points in that system for energy efficiency. We were able to install almost 12 miles of bicycle infrastructure during the period of the Phase 1 plan. We evaluated a roundabout intersection, and we created, mostly the police created a bicycle, police and CD, I should say, a bicycle traffic enforcement and education program. So the goals that were set in our 2012 Phase 1 document were to reduce greenhouse gases 12% by 2020 and 80% by 2050. So again, this second phase goes from 2015 to 2020. So it's really focused on reaching that first milestone of a 25% reduction in greenhouse gases. In the graphic at the bottom of this slide, the red bar represents our 2007 baseline greenhouse gas inventory. The blue bar, both the dark blue combined with the light blue, represents our projections of what our greenhouse gases will be in 2020. And you'll observe that it's just slightly more than the 2007 inventory. In our original plan, this was not the case. The 2020 inventory projection was quite a bit more. The reason for the difference is that we have a new greenhouse gas modeling program, or I should say an updated one. Same organization created it, but the new one is modern, much more sophisticated. One of the things it allows us to do now is to incorporate the state's renewable portfolio standard into the model. And what that's done, just to explain, renewable portfolio standard is a state law that requires electricity producers to every year increase the proportion of their electricity that is renewable by 1 or 1.5%. So we have this growing percentage of our grid power that is renewable energy. So the effect of that has been to greatly slow down our greenhouse gas inventory growth over the years. What the model shows is that the effect of the RPS, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, about counteracts the growth in greenhouse gas emissions from population growth, or estimated or projected population growth. So this is where we are at now. 2007 is our baseline. Our goal was to reduce greenhouse gases 25% by 2020. In our 2013 inventory, we show a 10% reduction in greenhouse gases. This 10% reduction includes the effect of the Renewable Portfolio Standard, as well as the city's purchase of renewable energy credits. This graphic, again from our model, shows where we are at in our 2013 inventory. The orange line at the top is the business as usual projection, and you'll see between the 2013 hash at the bottom and 2014, which is not listed but shown, you see that there's sort of a bite taken out of that graph. There's a decline. That is the representation of the effect of our renewable energy credits purchases. You'll notice that those different colors represent different sectors of greenhouse gas emissions. And I'll point out that very thin red line, that's the emissions from our generation and disposal of solid waste. I bring that up because it's really important when we're planning how we're going to achieve these large reductions that we look for taking bites out of the bigger sectors. So for instance, if you look at this projection, if we were to reduce emissions from our solid waste by 50%, the overall effect would be quite small. And taking that into consideration, we do not have any specific actions in this phase regarding solid waste. So I had mentioned that we have a 10% reduction between 2007 and 2013. What I haven't described is the context of that. So is 10% a lot or is it a little? Well, in our first phase of our climate action plan, we compared ourselves to a number of cities in terms of the goal reductions, the target reductions that we were going to go for. In the second phase, we've updated that same listing with the progress that all these other cities have made as well as ours. So we have a 10% reduction, and you can see the percent reductions of some of these other cities, 6%, 7%, 4, 12, plus 2, 11. One city has not conducted a second inventory since they've created their baseline. Another city is seeking funding to conduct a new inventory. Now, not all of these cities have the same baseline year, so it's not exactly an apples-to-apples comparison, but it does give you a sense of how difficult and what a challenge it is to reduce an entire city's greenhouse gas emissions. So I mentioned that we have a new model for our greenhouse gas inventory. These are some screenshots from that model. The model does two things. One, it models our total greenhouse gas emissions for a particular year. And two, it models a limited number of greenhouse gas reduction strategies. That is, it shows the effect that they have on our overall inventory. So what I've done is chosen some of the larger strategies in this model, and I've chosen them at scales, or I've applied them at scales that would get us to our 25% reduction. What we're shooting for is 404,000 metric tons. So you see in this graph, there are three strategies applied that could get us to our 2020 goal of a 25% reduction. Those three strategies are to continue buying renewable energy credits for residential consumption, restart the home energy performance program that the city ran for 1 year several years ago with federal stimulus dollars, and then three strategies that would equate to 25% reduction in the commercial sector. So taking big bites out of the residential and the commercial sectors, the two largest. I've got the actions in this plan listed in each section on this presentation. I'm not going to read them all to you, but I'll just summarize them real quickly, and then we can have some discussion. In the section 1, the first three actions are all policies to change the trajectory of our greenhouse gas emissions from buildings. The fourth strategy is to engage with Ameren, Illinois, to facilitate a data sharing with EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager program. That's a web-based program that allows building owners to benchmark and track their energy consumption in their buildings. That's the same program that allows a building to become Energy Star certified. The purpose of this goal, or the value of this action, is that when a utility connects with EPA's program, they can port their utility data directly over digitally. Otherwise, someone who wants to get their building Energy Star certified has to take their paper bill and type it back into yet another computer system. The paper bill came from a computer system to begin with, then it's printed on paper, then gets typed back into another computer system. That's a barrier for a lot of people to engage with Energy Star Portfolio Manager, use it as a tool to track their energy use, and get their building Energy Star certified. Action 5 is to seek funding for the Home Energy Performance Program. That was a program run several years ago where we added extra incentives. Perhaps most importantly, we paid for that $50 home energy audit, and that allowed or induced a great increase in the number of residents who took advantage of Ameren's other rebates, their already existing rebates. Next section really focuses on the transportation or gasoline emissions. The first action is to take a look at LEED-ND, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design for neighborhood development. That's their newest standard. And instead of looking at just the sustainability of an individual building, it looks at producing entire neighborhoods that have a lower environmental impact. And what we want to do is take a look at that standard and see if there are some codes or rules or protocols that we can bring into our own zoning and planning documents and rules. The next two goals address moving our mode share from single occupancy vehicle to other lower emissions travel modes. So that means bike, bus, ped, and carpool. Next section, we set some goals to continue purchasing renewable energy credits through municipal electric aggregation. Look at purchasing bundled power and renewable energy credits, which is a little bit different way to buy green power. We look at buying renewable energy credits for city facilities for their consumption. And we're looking at strategies to increase or improve the local on-site renewables market. The fourth section, and these sections mostly parallel the similar sections in the first phase document, is to set aside, or in addition to greenhouse gas mitigation, also look at climate adaptation. So we have some strategies to engage with the Illinois State Water Survey to encourage them to update the design storm standards. So the standards that tell you how big of retention pond or stormwater pipes you need to handle expected storm events. Those might be out of date if we have a changing climate and we're expecting more rainfall. We want to take a look at some strategies to maintain and improve our urban tree canopy. This is really important for a number of reasons. One, mature trees shade houses and reduce the heating demand, or excuse me, the cooling demand, keep the houses cooler without turning on the AC. Two, older trees store more carbon and add more stored carbon per year than younger trees. So it's really important that we do proper maintenance, including pruning cycles, to make sure that our trees live longer and store more carbon. Next section is to, all the goals are designed to leverage existing programs and partnerships to do more work. So instead of going our own way, partner with other organizations that have some capacity already built, and leverage those existing programs and organizations to do more energy efficiency and greenhouse gas mitigation. And the last section is to work with the Sustainability Advisory Commission to reevaluate our progress every 2 years, including a new greenhouse gas inventory. As far from what we've looked at from the cities that we're comparing ourselves to, some cities have set goals but never done an inventory. Some cities have set goals, done a baseline inventory, but never done a follow-up inventory. I haven't seen a city that's done 3. There's probably some out there, but it's somewhat ambitious in context to be looking at doing a greenhouse gas inventory every 2 years. But we think that's important to ensure we know whether we're on track. And then we also have a goal to create a new phase of our climate action plan in 2020 when we reach that first milestone. And I'm happy to take any questions you may have. Don't feel that you need to confine yourself to those topics that I mentioned that were planning related.
All right, this is a study session, so any questions or comments anyone has? Mr. Trail.
So what's the ratio of effort, expenditure, or whatever, between mitigation and reduction?
Can you explain that?
Mitigation plan, how much effort is going into mitigation of as opposed to reduction of greenhouse gas?
Do you mean reduction versus adaptation? Mitigation and reduction, I'm using those interchangeably. So are you thinking what's the comparison of how much money we're spending on reduction versus adaptation?
Money, effort, and not everything's small.
Sure. So for instance, the program that we had several years ago, the Home Energy Performance Program, it sort of sweetened the deal on Ameren's home energy efficiency incentives. And we also did a lot of promotions around that. So it was sort of in addition to the advertising that Ameren Act on Energy does. We spent $74,000 over a year and a half in that program. And I have the numbers, I don't have them with me tonight, but it was per dollar. It was very, very effective. It was a very, very cheap way to get greenhouse gas reductions, cheaper than any other strategy that we've been able to, model to that sort of precision. But that's, I'm planning or envisioning that if we were to redo that program, restart that program, it would be somewhere around $60,000 to $70,000 a year. So that's a very standard, typical greenhouse gas reduction strategy. Adaptation strategies, it's hard to generalize because they could be so different. So take pruning cycles, for instance, with our urban tree canopy. That's something we do already. The goal that we have is to focus on how do we increase the pruning cycle. And that's probably going to mean training and staffing. So you can imagine, what's one full-time equivalent cost the city if we were to add one additional staff person to the Arbor division. That would give you a sense of scale for what adaptation costs.
So that's just, is it a ratio between adaptation and reduction? What's the basic ratio? I realize
Let's go back to the adaptation slide real quick. So action 1 is essentially a letter. It's really no expenditure. We're encouraging someone else to do something, right? Evaluation. So I mentioned the pruning cycles. There's action 3 is a goal to incorporate pollinator-supported plant species in city landscapes. The reason that's important is there's a lot of problems with bee colonies collapsing, and that may be climate-related, it may be pollution-related. There's a lot of research going on right now. What we know for sure is that most of our food is pollinated by bees and other insects, so that's really important to maintain those populations. That's probably doesn't involve any increase in cost. It's just a matter of choosing these particular plants over those particular plants. So it's a swap. Action 4 is looking at creating a more species, genus, and family diverse tree canopy. That's a strategy, and again, that's probably doesn't have a lot of cost implications. It's choosing this species over that one. The purpose of that strategy is we don't have the ability to predict which species are going to thrive or fail in a changing climate, because we're going to have, the modeling expects some extremes. We had a very cold winter recently, but we also have a general trend of more heat throughout the year. So the strategy for Arbor is to maximize the diversity. So no matter which species tend to end up not doing well in our region in the future, we've limited the impact of those trees not surviving. So a lot of our strategies are changing how we do what we already do, not a lot of cost implication, working with other institutions. Yeah, I hope that answers your question somewhat. I don't have a, yeah, I guess if we're not spending anything on adaptation, I guess it's 100 to 0.
Part of the root of my question is how urgent does the city perceive the need for adaptation to be, and how effective does the city perceive that the degree of greenhouse gas reduction that we're planning and the timetable we're planning on is meaningful?
I think the Sustainability Advisory Commission would say we shouldn't make adaptation and greenhouse gas reduction compete with each other. We have to do both of them. It's one of those things where you have to do everything all at once. Adaptation is certainly taken seriously, and you can see it here in our urban tree canopy, because we think that we already see certain trees not thriving. And it could be climate, could be other reasons, pollution, but we already see other certain tree species that are not thriving in our community. And actually, Arbor has been working towards diversifying the species lists for years. What we're doing here is really codifying it and setting numerical targets. A lot of the adaptation, so we had 4 or 5 speakers come to speak to the Sustainability Advisory Commission about adaptation, and the water utility, public health, public works. These type of folks came and spoke to us about what a changing climate would mean, what adaptation would mean for their work. And one of the conclusions we came to is, if you go on the internet and you look up, best practices for climate adaptation, and you get your 25-point list, if you go through there, a lot of those strategies, a lot of those priorities are things that in our community are outside of city government. They're in a different constitutional office. So they would be something that the public health department would do. They would be something that the sanitary district would do, the private water company would do. So a lot of what would be on your top 10 list for climate adaptation are not within our purview. Now, we thought it was important to have that conversation at the Sustainability Advisory Commission with those other agencies anyway, because just because it's not within our control doesn't mean it's not within our interest. So we had that conversation with them anyway. The other thing that, the other conclusion that we came to with a lot of the climate adaptation strategies is that they aren't necessarily new things for our community. They wouldn't be doing new things. They would be doing things they're already doing, but more of. So, for instance, cooling centers, so that so people can deal with hotter summers. That's something that the health department does. Now, they may need to do more of it in the future, but they already do that. And so that came up in a lot of instances. The last conclusion about adaptation is that and this is what the Ameren pointed out, they do planning all the time to reassess what their grid loading is going to be, what their capacity needs to be. And they're always reassessing and overbuilding their capacity so that they never have a brownout. The pace of climate change is such that it'll be incorporated in the reevaluation that all of these cities do. So you have a new budget every year. If slowly over time this thing you already do, say cooling centers, becomes a greater need, well, you're looking at your budget every year, so you have time to adapt to that. Those are some of the conclusions that we've learned through those meetings.
Anything further? Mr. Powell.
I'll make a comment from the point of view of what I do every day. I think on goal number 1, requiring new commercial buildings to be LEED certified or something like that is a very bad idea. Incentives are a very good idea, because if it's required, developers are going to look at that as a penalty, because it's expensive to do and it's not always in their economic interest to do it. I know that for instance, in Champaign, on certain districts, if you if you achieve LEED certification on a building, they'll give you a bump in FAR, things like that. So the incentives are very good, and we try to do that. But if we're forced to do it, it's going to hurt development, I guarantee you.
So the action 1 is in regards to city facilities. So this would be something we would impose on ourselves.
It says in action
Right.
3, commercial buildings, you know.
Right.
Energy
It's-
Star certification, LEED certification, or well, that's houses, or passive house certification. If you require it, I think that's bad.
Right.
If you give incentives, I think that's very good.
And that's why what we did is we put both of those words in there, incentivize or require, and so that we would look at both of those as a potential policy. But I appreciate your input.
Yeah, it's interesting. I found a study from Harvard that looked at programs that incentivize LEED through adding FAR or additional units. And I think that that is something we should really take a look at. I don't know if city staff has looked at that or not. And there may be other things. Boston, I found a Boston requires LEED actually for, but you can, but then they have, you can get bonus points for doing other things. And I agree with you. I don't think we should require anything. But an incentive program combined with, for example, you can get bonus points for doing historic preservation. You can get bonus points for groundwater recharge, for meetings, all sorts of options in regard to mobility, having people take public transportation, subsidizing the cost of carpool parking spots, bicycle racks, you know, all things of that nature. And so, you know, I think we should take a real hard look at that. And I think that the other thing you know, you could either do it citywide or you could do it in an overlay district. You could make it apply to certain classes of zoning and not in others. Or in the case of the Boston ordinance, it differs by the nature of the property. And so I think that, you know, I'd like to see us chew on that for a little while and maybe look at it. Are we going to amend the zoning ordinance? Weren't you working on something on that?
So what we're working on is an amendment to incorporate the LEED for neighborhood design standards into our planned unit development section. Because those kind of naturally go together. The PUD section allows you to kind of waive certain requirements if you're providing a community benefit. So I think we'll be able to fit those in pretty well. We haven't looked yet into any type of density or other bonuses citywide. It's certainly a possibility. I know other cities offer that, and another example would be in Uptown Normal. If you want their TIF incentives, you have to have a LEED certified building. So these are all types of things we're trying to look at, but we haven't been able to peg down exactly how we want to incorporate them into zoning quite yet.
Okay.
Another interesting example is City of Cincinnati, which does a tax abatement. And I believe they do the additional value that you add to the property. They do a tax abatement for a number of years for LEED buildings.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different incentives you could think of, and you could have a range or, you know, a menu.
Yep.
So that, you know, people can sort of customize and choose from. So I think it's a great study, and I'm glad to see the success that you've been having. It looks like you're well on your way toward meeting your emissions reductions. So, anything further? Nope. Okay, well, having concluded this study session then, we're adjourned.